Welcome back everyone to Formula 1 2020 and to a qualifying report for the Formula 1 70th Anniversary Grand Prix. Still a mouthful, that one is, but a really fascinating session today. We spoke about it on Friday, on Thursday, talking about tyres and that with the softer compounds this weekend, a full step down for each compound, soft, medium and hard, we knew that was going to be quite a big storyline in the Grand Prix. I didn't think it'd be quite such a storyline in qualifying. A whole mix of strategies with drivers from Q1 all the way through to Q3 throwing on the soft tyres, some cars late on in Q3 throwing on the mediums for the best lap times. Really fascinating strategies, but the result we've come away with is a completely mixed up grid. Drivers staying in Q1 when they probably should have progressed to Q3. We've got a couple of drivers in Q2 which certainly put in some fantastic performances and some ultimate performances and huge surprises in the final session of the day. As always, spoilers ahead, so if you don't want to know the result of today's qualifying session, watch the highlight, watch the session, and then quickly pop back over here once you're finished. As always as well, if you are new around here, feel free to subscribe to keep up to date with all Formula 1 2020 news reviews, all that good stuff. But let's crack on with your result for the 2020 70th Anniversary Grand Prix. And it was not a repeat of last weekend's result. Valtteri Bottas just beating teammate Lewis Hamilton to pole position once again in 2020. It is a Mercedes front row lockout, almost a second in front of the next best driver, but the only driver within a second of the two Mercedes, Nico Hülkenberg. What a stunning performance here this weekend. Of course, was very up and down last weekend. Didn't even get a chance to actually take part in the Grand Prix, but an incredible effort in qualifying this afternoon. Third place for him, his best result since Austria 2016, I believe. The Hulk is well and truly back. Max Verstappen was P4 for Red Bull, a little bit further back than he would have wanted. I mean, one position, but you'd expect Max Verstappen to be in P3, so a little bit frustrated, but in tomorrow, he's going to have a good car to progress forward. Daniel Ricciardo, a stunning drive from him to P5. Lance Stroll, disappointed to be behind his teammate, P6 for the Canadian. Gasly, another driver, did a fantastic job not only to get through to Q3 but to qualify P7. Leclerc, disappointed with 8th. Albon again a little bit off his teammate Max Verstappen in P9. And Lando Norris, the lead McLaren, in P10. Esteban Ocon lines up 11th, however, as of the time recording, does not yet have a grid penalty, but I can almost put money on it. That'll be at least 3, maybe even a 5-place drop after impeding George Russell at the end of Q1. Sebastian Vettel struggled, P12 for the Ferrari, but all of these drivers in this little group here will have tyre choice tomorrow, which really is going to be key going into the race. Behind Sebastian Vettel, Carlos Sainz 13th for McLaren, but then in 14th and 15th currently, Romain Grosjean and George Russell, these two well in the mix for driver of the day. Grosjean, where has that come from? How on earth he got that car through to Q2? Incredible. That's only the second time this year Haas have got through to Q2. The first time was Grosjean in the first race of the season. Not only that, out-qualifying George Russell 2/10 off Q3. That is a mighty performance that I don't think anyone expected. What a drive from Romain Grosjean, and George Russell once again through to Q2 in that Williams car. Mega drive from both of those two drivers. Danny Kvyat, P16 out in Q1, would have got through, lap time deleted on his final run at the end of the session. Magnussen struggled all through practice 1, 2 and 3 this morning, and in qualifying just never quite hooked a lap up together. Ultimately about half a second off teammate Romain Grosjean. Bit of work to do tomorrow if he wants to get anywhere near the pace of his teammate and anywhere near points. Though, we saw last weekend Haas going for different strategies, and with tyres a huge variable tomorrow, maybe they will try something a little bit unique compared to the rest of the field. Latifi, 18th, not too bad from the Canadian, only his 5th race in Formula 1 of course. Giovinazzi continues his 100% out-qualifying his teammate record in 2020, and for only the second time in his Formula 1 career, Kimi Raikkonen will start dead last in P20. So your grid tomorrow looks like this. Again, This is before any penalties are given to Esteban Ocon, but we are expecting at least a 3, maybe even a 5-place drop. It is a Mercedes front row lockout, Bottas P1, Hamilton P2. Hulkenberg, of course, that incredible qualifying, lines up alongside Max Verstappen and just in front of his old teammate Daniel Ricciardo. Hulkenberg's now teammate Lance Stroll is alongside Ricciardo in P6. Gasly and Leclerc, that's an interesting one, lining up on row 4. Albon, out-qualified again by Gasly, is row 5 with Lando Norris. It is currently Ocon, who is 11th on row 6, but it was very likely that it's going to be Vettel and Sainz. Grosjean, then, I'm expecting to be 13th, making today's performance even better with Ocon 14th. Then on row 8, it's Russell and Kvyat. Row 9, Magnussen and Latifi. And the back row, row 10, lockout from Alfa Romeo. And as always, if you are new around here, what we do now is we like to just dissect the session, go team by team usually, sometimes driver by driver, but I think team by team is going to work well today. We'll start from the back, work our way forwards. And so that means, sadly, we start with Alfa Romeo. Smashed it in the first ever Formula 1 Grand Prix. I think they got a 1, 2, 3, 4. This Grand Prix, the 70th anniversary, 19th and 20th. They've been stuck in that backpack all season long, but whereas this weekend we saw Grosjean and Russell, 2 other drivers in those back 3 teams, going through to Q2, but Alfa just looked nowhere near the pace of any other team on the grid. A real disappointment for a team that had made so much progress over the last couple of years after the Alfa Romeo brand coming on board. Giovinazzi, I suppose, keeping that 100% record, the only real story of note. And they are the only team yet to get a single driver through to Q2. Latifi, just in front of the 2 Alphas, not a bad job from Nicholas, still getting up to speed in Formula 1. But the big story with Williams, of course, is George Russell, once again through to Q2. He said in his post-race or post-quali interviews, he was disappointed and surprised at the pace of Grosjean. But in all fairness to both of them, again, very, very close to getting through to Q3. And that was the nature and what made this session so interesting, was the fact that tyre choice was so crucial. And I tell you what, if they'd have just nicked it in at the right time while the track was rubbering up nicely, just have maybe been on the right compound or one of the teams been off, maybe it could have been even better. But to be fair to them, both of them, cracking job today. George Russell, only out in Q1 once this season, and that was in the first races of the year, is getting better and better and better. And with Bottas' contract being announced for next year, whether that's given Russell that little bit more edge, I'm not too sure, but he really is doing a cracking job at the moment. But I want to see him do a little bit better in the race tomorrow than he has over the last few weekends. In front of the Williams boys, we've got the Haas cars. Magnussen all the way down in 17th. Grosjean much better in 14th, what could become 13th. But I kind of spoke about them, most of their session really. In the breakdown, Magnussen all weekend long, practice 1, 2, 3, just really struggling. Grosjean, on the other hand, doing a really impressive job, was in the top 10 in both practice 1 and 2, I believe. Through Q1, was looking very strong. I think P8, he finished Q1, and Q2 again, wasn't really able to get anything better out of that car. But credit where credit's due for Grosjean this weekend. A lot of not nice comments, I think, and questionable driving from last weekend from Roman. Is a driver, certainly, that is on the balance of people saying he doesn't defend enough in Hungary, then defends too hard, and he sometimes really does struggle to find that balance. But he's certainly a driver, and we've seen this in the past, you give him a great result and his fortunes really do turn around. And a great result like today, maybe if they go for a unique strategy like last weekend, he can pick up his first points of the season. Another driver out in Q1 and mixed fortunes with their 2 drivers. AlphaTauri, it's strange talking about them at this point, but I generally do it, like I say, starting from the bottom, and Kvyat is all the way down in 16th place. His teammate, Pierre Gasly, in 7th. Pierre, I believe, just like Giovinazzi, has currently got a 100% record of out-qualifying his teammate in 2020. Danny Kvyat was having an okay race last time out before his tyre exploded, really, going through the Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel complex just at the beginning of that sequence of corners. Just never quite got it right today, even though he would have gone through into Q2 before making that mistake. Just doesn't seem to be quite on the level with his teammate at the moment. And Gasly, for sure, is one of those drivers that's got to be in contention for driver of the day. Once again, smashing it here in Silverstone. 11th last time out in qualifying. Got the same lap time as Lance Stroll. This time round, comfortably through to Q3. No worries whatsoever. Nailed it with the tyres. Out qualifying Alex Albon again. I think that's the third race, maybe even the fourth race now in concession. And I'd certainly want to do a video on this, maybe in a couple of weeks' time when things have boiled down a little bit. I think it would be silly for Red Bull to make a swap mid-season or at any point in the middle of this year, no matter who they want to bring in. But I think for Gasly, he's certainly warranting a drive elsewhere. He's been on the ball this year so much in a car that we've said several times is slower than the McLarens, the Renaults, the Ferraris, and yet he's out qualifying both McLarens, both Ferraris as well. I was going to say almost both Ferraris, but both Ferraris, a Renault, a Red Bull. Smashing it this year is Pierre Gasly. McLaren are up next. Sainz, a big surprise not getting through to Q3. Their pace wasn't really looking anything like it was last weekend, which was a huge surprise considering Sainz and Norris's pace through the Grand Prix. But this softer step of compounds really not helping the team. And ultimately Sainz, who is going to be disappointed today, out in Q2, just in front of Grosjean and Russell. On paper, doesn't look good. But I said it earlier on, I really do think it's going to be a huge benefit to qualify just outside the top 10, having those fresh choice of tyres, starting on the hard compounds I would expect everyone to do outside that top 10, and try if they can, it's going to be difficult, but try and do a one-stop. It's going to be very, very difficult, but if anyone's going to be able to do it, I think it's going to be the likes of Sainz, Ocon, Vettel, and we know what Haas are like with their strategy. So really interested to see how much that's going to affect those guys at the bottom end of the top 10 and those just outside the top 10. Norris, on the other hand, 10th place. He was disappointed. You can understand why when you look at their pace last weekend. But in all fairness, getting through to Q3, realistically, with the pace they had this weekend, isn't a bad job whatsoever. Nothing stellar, though, from Lando this time out. Will we see a last lap overtake? Probably, with the rate Norris is going. The team in front of McLaren, Ferrari, it's just a bit all over the place for the Scarlet Ferraris. Vettel, P12, yes, he could be elevated to P11, and again, he's going to have a lovely little strategy option with tyres. But saying that, once again, he's about half a second off a teammate. Once again, he's not got through to Q3. Once again, in practice, he's had plenty of issues. Just nothing seems to be going right for him. He will have a home Grand Prix this year back at the Nürburgring, and maybe he's hoping just for something really silly and superstitious like that to just get him out of the rut that he's in at the moment. But it just seems like everything he tries to do doesn't go to plan. The only saving grace is that his teammate wasn't quite on the level of he was last weekend. Just like the McLarens, Leclerc just wasn't ever really able to put in those stellar laps. Of course, qualified 4th last weekend. This weekend, all the way down in P8. Again, not terrible when you consider Ferrari's pace, but nothing sublime. Alex Albon, P9. I suppose I've sprinkled around Albon, talking about Gasly and different boys and girls in the field today, but through to Q3. That is a step forward. The last 2 Grand Prix out in Q2. So progress is being made. A little bit closer to Max this time out. So it's an alright session. But he will be a driver tomorrow that Red Bull will need to move forward. He's 6th in the standings at the moment, which is probably the bare minimum you would ask for. But then when you've got Ricciardo all the way up in 5th, Stroll 6th, Gasly 7th, all drivers that are there or thereabouts with Alex Albon in the points. If Albon stays 9th or even drops outside of that top 10, and a few of those guys score big tomorrow, which it looks like they might do, lots of questions are going to start to come about. They already have in the media. Slightly unfair, considering if he had won that first race of the season without contact with Hamilton, he would have been comfortably up in that top 5, even top 3, maybe even top 2 in the standings. But ifs and buts and all that, he's not. He is down in 6th. He has to get a big result this weekend, I think. Questions will start to be asked otherwise, but still got a long way to go tomorrow. Tyre choice, Red Bull looks strong on their tyres. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. We spoke about Gasly, I suppose. Oh, Renault. I haven't spoke about Ocon yet, and Daniel Ricciardo. Why not talk about them now? A similar story to what we'd seen all season long. Ricciardo being that number 1, Ocon being that number 2. Danny Rick, another sublime performance in qualifying. It was really nice to see him there with Max Verstappen all session long. And I think over the last year and a half, where he's been at Renault, I think a couple of people have started to question Ricciardo's ability. But then when you see performances like this, I think people really start to understand that Ricciardo is a top tier driver in F1. Ocon, a silly mistake with George Russell, but I do agree with the Sky commentators that the way he overtook the Alfa Romeo, I think it was Giovinazzi at the time, not looking at Russell in his mirrors, looks to me as if the team didn't get on the radio and tell him about it because he just was completely blind by the event. Will be a penalty though. If it's not, I'd be hugely surprised. But again, in that group just outside the top 10, options there for Renault. Pace is in the car. Big day for Ocon to prove he's got the ability to really lead that team next year with Alonso coming on board. And again, Danny Rick, awesome job today. Racing Point, a team that has been in the news all over the place the last few days. P6 for Lance Stroll. It's okay. It's pretty much where he's been all season long. But the huge story, teammate Nico Hülkenberg, P3. Of course, you know the story by now. Only jumped in the car at last minute last weekend. Wasn't able to do the Grand Prix. Didn't even make it to the starting grid. Fingers crossed he can make it there this time out. What a stellar performance today. Verstappen will start on the hard tyres. I believe Nico will be on the medium tyres. Saying that, even if he gets a 4th place, that is a sublime drive. The fact he's in front of Lance Stroll is brilliant. Really can't heap on enough praise. Really, really special to see Hülkenberg in that top 3. Up there with the 2 Mercedes for those interviews. Love to see it. And one of his best opportunities in his career, if things go his way tomorrow, for a podium. I don't want to get carried away just yet, but fingers crossed things go his way. Verstappen, we mentioned him briefly when talking about Albon, but okay session. You would have expected him to be P3, but starting on the hards, that's not bad at all. And I always feel really, really bad when I talk about Mercedes because what is there to say? The class of the field, yet again, about a second in front of their closest challenger, Nico Hülkenberg. Bottas just edging Hamilton. And it's funny, we always say that when Mercedes, and there's kind of a trend there, when Mercedes announce Bottas has got a 1-year deal, he always seems to just up that a little bit more. When he's just comfortable that he's got that extra year, pressures off a little bit, always seems to just add a couple extra tenths to his laps. And straight away, the trend that we've seen for the last couple of years with Valtteri doing that has happened straight away here. Pole position on a track where Lewis is usually so good. Really looking forward to seeing Valtteri make that championship comeback tomorrow. But he does need, realistically, Hamilton to DNF at one of the remaining 10 races to really give him a chance of a title hunt. But step 1, pole position complete. Before we go, this is the fun bit. Driver of the day, ones to watch for tomorrow's Grand Prix. There's quite a few to pick from for driver of the day. Gasly, another awesome drive. Danny Rick, an awesome drive. George Russell, you all know I would love to give it to Grosjean. I was so close to giving it to Grosjean. But you really cannot ignore the performance of Nico Hülkenberg today. When you consider the fact he's only just jumped into that car, the only real running he's been able to do is on the simulator at the factory just over the road from Silverstone. What a stunning drive. The only driver within a second of the 2 Mercedes cars. 3.5 tenths in front of Lance Stroll, who's been with that team 2 years now and has had that car all the way through winter testing, the first 5 races. Hülkenberg absolutely loved it. Really did. A really emotional moment when he nicked up to P3. And ones to watch for the race tomorrow. A little bit different because the majority of drivers, I really don't think it's going to be a procession. I really do think strategy is going to be all over the place tomorrow, which I cannot wait for. 1 stops, 2 stops, maybe even 3 stops in the mix. But Nico Hülkenberg, cannot wait to see if he can fend off Max Verstappen. Danny Kvyat, a difficult day today, but he does have a car there which can get through to Q3. Danny Rick behind Verstappen, behind Hülkenberg. Can't wait to see him fighting with his big chums. And my F1E one to watch is Carlos Sainz, 13th for the Spaniard, maybe elevated up to 12th. I think he's got a solid car underneath him, along with Sebastian Vettel, different tyre strategy. I think Sainz could have a good race and a bit of redemption from last weekend's tyre blowout. And that is it for your qualifying report for the 70th Anniversary Grand Prix. Your race tomorrow at 10 past 2, sprint race in the morning. The feature race is currently underway. It's Schumacher currently leading as it currently is on in the background. So all your report from Formula 2 tomorrow after the race review. But that is it for today. Thank you all very much for watching. If you are new around here, feel free to subscribe. Red button is down below. Like the video if you did enjoy. Really helps out the channel. Dislike if you didn't and if you want to give some feedback. But as always guys, enjoy the race tomorrow. Thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next one.